All right, today we got Larry Hancock back to talk about the JFK file release and how it relates to his book, The Oswald Puzzle. If you want, Larry, would you like to maybe give a quick summary of your book to someone who may have not heard of it yet?
Sure. The book, The Oswald Puzzle, is called that way. The title is for two reasons. First, about two-thirds of the book is a biography. We really, Oswald has been pictured in certain ways by the Warren Commission, the official history of the assassination. There's that picture of Oswald. There's a picture of Oswald in the history books, which is usually very simplified and a very simple character profile. Our goal was to do with the documents that we now have available, with some sources that weren't available before this, to really do the best possible biography of Oswald as possible, and to paint it in a much better, much fuller character profile, over time, not just Oswald in 1963, not just Oswald in Russia, not just Oswald in the Marines, but Oswald overall as a person from his full life, as short as that was. But then the final third of the book addresses the fact that although we find Oswald's behavior and character very consistent over time, from his teenage years on, a lot of consistency, which is helpful in understanding, what his motivations were and what his agendas are. His behavior on November 22nd was anomalous. He did things on November 22nd that you wouldn't expect. Oswald was a news freak, for example. He listened to a lot of television, news broadcast, read newspaper constantly, read constantly. There's just no way it's reasonable for Oswald to have left the Texas Schoolbook Depository with something going on. It's unreasonable to expect that Oswald didn't know that JFK was going to be in town, didn't know that there was, that's not reasonable. So if he did that and other things that are kind of strange in terms of his overall character profile, how do you explain that? And in the last third of the book, we do present what we feel is a scenario to explain his behavior that week, the night before with his wife, what was going on that day, that would cover the anomalies, kind of, and still be in character for Oswald, but explain why made him look suspicious, and far more suspicious than he probably would have if something had not been in play. And we present the fact that it had nothing to do with JFK, and certainly nothing to do with shooting JFK. It just happened to fit into the plans of those who were planning to shoot JFK, and they managed that. It wasn't coincidental. It wasn't just Oswald. It was Oswald being manipulated to set him up to look like the assassin. So, long-winded, short summary of the book.
Right on. Have you heard from people? Have you heard back from people that have read it? Pretty good things, or
Oh yeah, lots of people, and I've been in this for 30 years. I know a lot of people, so I've heard back from a lot of people that know me, that have read my other work, and we're wondering if somebody could do something new on Oswald by this time. Like we have read about Lee Harvey Oswald in 30 conspiracy books so far, plus yours. Is this really going to be different? And so far, they have been convinced, and it's I'm pleased, and we're pleased to see that they think it is different, and it was something new to them. And quite frankly, especially not in just in regard to Oswald's bio, but in regard to this scenario, kind of like, oh, it's just this, this troubled us as much as it troubled everybody else, and this is a plausible explanation. So yeah, the feedback has been good so far. The book has been well received, and we're happy with that. I'd like to hope it. Our goal with a lot of the books like this, for me, has always been to get them into libraries, though, because I try to write works of history, and it's great to have it on the internet, whatever. But I hope to get in a lot of libraries, and hopefully Skyhorse will do that. So but it's early days for that yet. It's only been out for about a month.
have you had any of your books, previous books, are they in libraries?
Oh
or is
yeah,
this okay?
especially
Right.
the national security books. I think Shadow Warfare at one point in time was in close or over 1,500 libraries worldwide. Uh,
Jeez.
a lot of coverage in overseas libraries. The other books, Surprise Attack, did very well in libraries. The book on the King assassination did well in libraries. Quite frankly, the publisher often determines how well it gets looked at for libraries. Of course, when I started out, having it in hardcover was also a plus in getting into libraries. Not so much now, but yeah, I've I've had some books in the run of 800 to 1,500 libraries, and they stay in there. I think some of them are still in several hundred, although they do run off over time because unless they get a certain readership, they get called. Uh, but yeah, I've had some success. Actually, not so much with the smaller publishers and with the paperbacks. So that's why we have high hopes for the Oswald Puzzle because it's in the right format.
Yeah. Uh, when you first heard that Trump was going to release these files, you may have already assumed he was going to do that. But with the timing of that and the book release, how'd that make you feel?
Finally, it's like it's hard to time a history book for coverage. It's like
Right.
when are you going to release a history book about something that's 70 years old? Is it? I've had people go, well, how do you make the news with a history book? And the honest answer is you usually don't. The one of the things that's done is to release it on an anniversary date. Most JFK books are released in November every year because there are news stories just because of the anniversary. Books on the King assassination are released on, so that's that's one timing thing that gets you some coverage, but otherwise it's very difficult. And in this case, for once, out of like 14 books, the release finally was coincident with some news that got it attention. It's like I guess if you keep at it long enough, maybe you do hit it. And this did get it some media attention. The announcement, I think the most challenging thing at this point is a lot of people want to talk about the release, but a lot of people misunderstand what the executive directive really said. I keep getting calls about, so what have you seen in the new records release? And it's like, you don't understand. There is no new records release yet. We're unsure what, anyway. So that's a subject, which is good because people want to talk about that, but people, I've had relatives call me up and say, so now that you've got the new documents, what do you think? It's like, well, I think I don't have the new documents, is what I think.
Yeah, the 45 days or whatever is not up until like March 7th or 8th, something like that, right?
Well, for the JFK stuff, supposedly a plan was supposed to be provided to the White House, and we assumed it would be shared about how they were going to handle JFK. Um, the White House says it's been given the plan. It has not released anything about the plan, when it's going to begin on the plan, who's really going to do it, how they're going to make documents accessible. So we don't, that supposedly the White House has a plan, whatever it is. At this point, it's as non-transparent as the documents are so far. And I think the other thing that concerns us a bit is now that we've gone back and looked at the directive that the president signed, if you look at the fine print and the exclusions at the end, one of the things it says is this directive does not take away any of the priorities, the legal authority of the individual agencies, which, if you think about that for a minute, says all those agencies still have the right to claim redactions, to withhold documents. And it's like, wait a minute, are we have to going through another cycle of they're still going to withhold it, they're still going to redact it, and then how does that get approved?
Right.
It's not what we thought that it would be, and what most people think it is. At least it's that's not what we've seen so far.
You would you say it's fair to say the average person probably assumes all files are going to be released by this,
Correct. They
which
do, and
is
it
go ahead.
is yeah. There's well, the first big question is it says nothing about redactions, we have tens of thousands of pages that have already been released. Some of them are extensively redacted. There's nothing in the directive that says we're going to get all those again unredacted, which would be a huge body of work in itself. I mean, we have hundreds of thousands of pages of documents. Who's going to go back through, take all those originals, and is somebody going to review them again to make, okay, well, we're going to unredact this, not unredact that? That would be a huge piece of work in itself. Plus, what has not been released, what we know that's not out there, that was not in the collection at DARA. I mean, I think most people feel that this is all sitting in the National Archives, and all you do is like draw the sheet, open the door, whatever, the boxes, the file cabinets. But most of what we really need is not at the National Archives yet. It is still held by the agencies involved, whether that's ONI, Office of Naval Intelligence, whether it is CIA, whether it's, you would still have to go get that. Now, it's true, the FBI did make a statement that they had turned over some files that they had not really known were JFK files. And the immediate reaction is, how do you know that they were JFK files now and you didn't before? Would you explain?
Right.
No explanation of that. It's like, did you just miss a box or two, or what? How did you? Uh, so it's, again, no. Most people, I think, assume that they're all sitting somewhere, and it can be done easily, and it can't be done easily. And the thing that goes along with that is it's going to cost time and money to do that. And with the current surge of firing federal employees, like, who's going to be around to even do that?
Right.
Usually that would be the younger probationary employees that get that kind of grunt work. Well, they're now gone. So who's going to do it? Is there some special provision in funding? You know, as usual, the devil's in the details.
Yeah. I seen a number. I don't remember the article, but it said since the JFK Records Act was passed in '92, like 320,000 documents have been reviewed and 99% have been released.
Yeah, that's a
Uh,
credible number. Yeah.
that, for lack of a better description, hasn't really provided much information. Should we expect any documents that are going to be provided to provide anything real important?
The thing is, it has, and surprise. Okay, because we're looking at a couple of types of information. What it really has done is provide us with a lot of context information, a lot of background information to go back and look at it with more content, and that's allowed us to test some theories. Not, so I would say that the releases to date have been very productive. There's no smoking gun, but if we had not had those releases, I couldn't write the kind of books I've been writing. I could not have written Tipping Point on the conspiracy. I couldn't have written Nexus on the CIA and assassinations. I certainly couldn't have written the Oswald Puzzle. So all of those were useful, and actually, the ones that were most useful were those that allowed us to look inside agencies. Here's an example. Uh, documents were released that gave us the clue that the CIA actually had been concerned enough to investigate whether its own people and the Cubans associated with them had killed the president. Now, that was something that they had denied. They denied to the Warren Commission, the House Select Committee, that they had done any investigation of the assassination at all. And actually, perjury was committed in that testimony. We now know that they absolutely did. We know who was assigned to do it. We know the questions that they were given to ask. We know that they were supposed to generate a report. No report. Is that report still out there, or was it destroyed? Learning that it was destroyed would be pretty significant in itself. So either it is truly a smoking gun document that was withheld, and if the new DNI's committee went seriously looking for it, they might find it, or evidence that it had been destroyed. If nothing else, If it had been destroyed, there should be a destruction record. And you would know. It's kind of like Secret Service records have been destroyed, but at least there's a destruction right. There's a legal process for all this. If it was just ditched and destroyed in the toilet somewhere, like one of the FBI reports on Oswald was, that would be really suspicious. I mean, that's almost a smoking gun in itself. So those documents have been very useful. It's just that, again, everybody wants to believe, I think, that the government investigated this and the government really knew what happened and they hid it somewhere, which is absolutely not what I found in my research and what others have found. What we found is there was an intentional effort not to investigate it, an intentional effort not to find what might be there. It's like you just you don't even want to look. Um, and if somebody did look, we know that Hoover actually within the FBI issued a directive on. He changed on that Friday afternoon after the assassination. He issued a directive saying he wanted an open-ended investigation. Go to all your sources, all your groups that might have had motives, full look. By Saturday morning, it was no, cut that out. We only want an investigation of Lee Harvey Oswald. That's all we want. And by Sunday afternoon, it was we want an investigation proving that Oswald did it. Like, okay, wait a minute. Over 48 hours, you went from a full blown investigation to a report, and you want us to prove he did it? Like, they still haven't collected the evidence. What do you want from me? And he gets a note back saying, this is really going to be difficult, J. Edgar. And it's like, J. Edgar does not care.
Do you think when these files are released, do you think there will be anything in there that really helps boost the ideas that you're presenting in your book, or do you think that's something that they really investigated?
We absolutely know if they released, well, for example, Jeff Morley has been in court for years looking for documents that should show case officer reporting by the people who were case officers for the anti-Castro student group, the DRE, the Student Directorate, who was in contact with Lee Harvey Oswald. We know that those people, the group made reports because they needed to make reports to get money. They were being funded to do this sort of work. They had to make reports. So that had to be in the files. The case officers routinely met with them. Those should have been in the files. We know that existed. He's been unable to obtain anything related to known case officers. If they release that, I think what we would see, and the reason we haven't seen it, is that there were indeed operations going on around Oswald, probably with him unwittingly being used as a propaganda device, that were in play. And they were still in play and being developed on November 22nd. The CIA did not want to admit that. So that could be explosive to that extent. It could show that Oswald was not, if Oswald's important enough to be being used by the CIA, he is not some lone nut off the radar, whatever. David and I found in our work on New Orleans that there's a very good chance, which it's been rumored for a long time, that Oswald was, at least for a period of time, considered as a provisional subversive informant for the FBI in New Orleans. One of the reasons for that is that he voluntarily went to the FBI and offered to inform on this non-existent Fair Play for Cuba committee group. If you're playing this by the book, he's providing them information that reads as if this is a clandestine group, which they are charged to investigate. They should have had him as a PSI. PSI, sorry. Did they? Did they not? Isn't that in the files out of New Orleans that we've never seen? Because they did not provide those. The only view of Oswald in New Orleans we have is from headquarters files and headquarters rewrites of stuff from New Orleans. So if that were really, so again, will that tell us about the conspiracy? No, but it might tell us why agencies participated in the cover up for their own interest. Again, I think what we could confirm for historical value is there was not the investigation that there should have been, and that's why we don't know. That's why any conclusion that he was acting alone, whatever, is not historically sound, because we can see that information was being shielded. That that could come out, and we know where to look. And we have gone to a lot of effort to compile list of these files. Essentially, what are they? Where are they? What would be in them? That we have offered to the administration. As far as I know at this point in time, I've seen no feedback that they're interested or willing to take them. Hopefully, that just me not seeing it, and that they are willing to take them, because it would save them a lot of time. Without that, I don't know how in the world they're going to find the good stuff, especially with everybody leaving.
Right. Do you think if every file was ever released, do you think that would in itself provide uh, the final story, if you will?
No, because I would not expect it to be documented. And in my view of what happened, you know, you don't. Well, let's put it this way. I've looked at least 7 different regime change operations where the CIA, as a body acting for the president, was doing this sort of stuff. They always use surrogates, like we were using the Cubans against Castro. You never find anything in writing. The best you find in Guatemala, it's a great document. It says, yeah, we know that these revolutionaries that we were working with, training or providing weapons, came to us and said they wanted to kill the president of Guatemala. We didn't respond. Like, wait a minute, you did not tell them no, you did not tell them yes, you just, what that really means is that's the way the game is played. Nothing is ever put in writing. Uh, we know that William Harvey, during circa about 1962, wrote a memo saying that somebody had brought up killing Castro in a meeting, and he's writing a memo saying this guy's out of your mind. We never say that in a meeting. We don't, shut him up. We should know better than that. So no, we're not going to find any documents. We can find clues, but we're not going to find any documents, because that's not, especially with this one, which is, if it was the rogue operation with experienced operators, they know. William Harvey, if William Harvey was part of it, as I think it was, this is the guy who said you never talk about this, and you certainly never write anything down. So no, I don't think so.
Right on. Um, do you think I've seen on your website that you have you mentioned that you're not writing as much on there right now because of the book release, but you're going to pick that up again pretty shortly. But I see you had
Yeah,
a thing that,
yeah.
go ahead.
No, you go ahead. That's okay.
Oh, I was just going to say, I seen you had a thing on there that was special to the RFK and MLK file release. Do you want to touch on that at all?
Yeah, of course, I've researched and worked with Stu Wexler, did 2 books on the MLK case. So we think that's pretty well documented. For MLK, we probably could do more. There are documents, especially out of the FBI's Merkin file, which was never released to the public, which was their investigation, full investigation. The House Select Committee's um, investigation was never released to the public. So if this new initiative managed to release those, that could very well deserve a new book, a new study, whatever, because it would be prime new documents that we've not seen that we think could help pull it together. So that's a possibility. RFK is much harder, because there was no federal investigation at all. It was strictly, yeah, the FBI did take some leads. The FBI did do some inquiries and interviews, but minimal compared to what LAPD did, because this was really a local crime. It was responded to that way. LAPD did collect a lot of evidence. There is a lot of evidence. What remained, they did destroy a lot of evidence, physical evidence, but that's more a matter of collecting what's available in universities and researchers have put together. Again, that would require time and money to put it together. Um, What we have not seen is we have not seen or never saw anything out of the prosecutor's office in LA. We've never seen any of the internal correspondence. We don't know why. It's very clear that the DA ordered LAPD to stop. They essentially drew a line at a certain point and said, just cut it out. No more. You can't find the polka dot dress girl. You know, we've got Sirhan. We want to go for a conviction. Don't muddy the waters anymore. And there is a specific point in time when they start going back through their files and marking everything off, and they close it down. We don't know why. What it would be fascinating to know what political decision caused that. And there are things that we could learn from there, but it's not like the other two. What they did not do, and fascinatingly, one of the key leads that the FBI got that LAPD did not get, in fact, they got it from the FBI, was a clue that might have led to foreign involvement. Might have been led back to Iran, to Savik, which is the Shah of Iran hated RFK extremely because RFK had been encouraging student revolutionaries in Iran to overthrow the Shah. James Angleton, we know, had files on the RFK assassination. We know they existed. We don't know if they still exist. We don't know if they were brought into the CIA headquarters for. There could very well be a CIA connection there that would reveal what they knew about possible foreign involvement. So there are some things that could be done, but again, you've got to really know the case to know where to look for that stuff. I hope it would be great to look there. I'd love to follow out that lead. So there are things that could be done on all of them, but they're all different because each case and each investigation was different.
Right. And handled by different people, right?
Yeah.
Do you think? I guess. Do you think that they're going to discover more files, or you think that was just something that? I mean, that's a pretty close number to what they withheld when Biden was president, right? They were going to release about the same amount at one point, and then they withheld some.
I don't think they're going to find a lot of new files unless, now here's the thing, we're talking about three different sets of materials. We're talking about the collection that's at NARA that was released by the ARB and the HSCA. I mean, you could release some documents that are already there that would add to the total, but not that many, hundreds, right, perhaps. That's a new release of documents that NARA already holds. What is key are the documents that are still out in the agencies that for whatever reason were not provided earlier. But that requires the work to go out and collect them. But there is actually a third body of material that's probably even more important to solving the JFK conspiracy, and that's the things that were privately held. Films, like the Nix film, materials, autopsy materials, JFK autopsy materials that were collected by the Kennedy family and taken out of evidence. We don't know where we are. We suspect that they might have been buried at sea, but all we know is the Kennedy family got them. Okay, those could be very important. Another thing, there are a series of interviews that William Manchester did with Jackie Kennedy, Bobby Kennedy, other individuals. He was working for the Kennedy family. Those were not provided and are still privately held. And what's especially important is we know that both Jackie Kennedy and Bobby Kennedy believed that there was a domestic conspiracy that killed JFK. We know that because they actually had people tell that to the Russians, that they weren't suspicious, because we know that there were suspicions. What did they tell Manchester, and why is this still sealed? What did they know? What did Bobby Kennedy know that led him to think that the CIA and the Cubans had done it the afternoon of the assassination because he made 2 telephone calls, and that was the subject of both calls. What made him think that? Did he tell Manchester? Nobody ever asked him that we have on record, but you know, the problem with that, of course, is it would require a presidential authority to actually make those legally collectible and take them into the public domain. It's amazing that some of these things were not taken into the public domain as evidence. But so there, when you talk about it again, it's complex because there are really 3 sets of material that we need, and it's the last 2, the ones that aren't in the collection, that would be most helpful and maybe even solving the crime.
I know that the Oswald puzzle is not about the assassination or the shooting, but there's been recent headlines about the 2 shooters. Have you seen that, and do you have any feelings
Oh
on
yes,
that?
and that's Congressman
Okay.
Luna's remark about looking at the material and thinking that there would be at least 2 shooters. Now, that's kind of interesting because I can't think of anywhere in the documents that we've seen that you would immediately read and go, "Oh, uh, it looks like somebody thought there were 2 shooters." I'm not sure what she has seen that would say that. Now, we have all come to that conclusion that there were 2 and probably 3 shooters over time. Maybe she read something that had been, a study or, so I don't know. Did she read a study that, because there's nothing in the Warren Commission, obviously, in their records or in their documents that says 2 shooters. That just wouldn't work if you want to convict Oswald. There's nothing coming from the FBI that says 2 shooters. So I don't know where she got that. That's pretty interesting. I'd be fascinated to hear that. But I will say what we did do in the Oswald puzzle, although in my other books, Someone Would Have Talked and Tippy Point, I do go into Dealey Plaza and the attack and those sorts of things in detail. We didn't want the Oswald puzzle wasn't intended for that, but what we do is we do go into detail in Lee Harvey Oswald, the week of the assassination, the evening before, the day of the assassination, and what Oswald was doing in regard to his agenda, and show how he was framed essentially. Um, but that's as close as we get to the actual details of the assassination. We do, I will say, we do go. We open the book with a chapter that says, "Oh, by the way, let's talk about the evidence. Let's talk about what the evidence and why the evidence in no way convicts Lee Harvey Oswald. The Warren Commission just wanted you to think it did." One of the fascinating things we go through is in the documents, and this gets back to your question of what did we learn from the released documents. One of the things we learned is that the Justice Department advisor to the Warren Commission actually advised the Warren Commission not to put anything in their report about Lee Oswald as a shooter or about his shooting abilities because they didn't think they could defend that case. It's like, what? Okay, justice does not want you to avoid Oswald as the shooter. Uh, what is this all about? And some of their own staff members wrote a long list of things that they shouldn't actually have in the report because they can't defend them. So that's all stuff we have learned from documents that have been released. So again, the book doesn't avoid the assassination per se, but it does focus on Lee Harvey Oswald.
I did see that you had something wrote up on your website about the shooting test. Do you want to touch on that at all, or is that I mean, it's
Oh yeah,
obviously important.
the shooting test. We can say this about Oswald. Okay, Lee Harvey Oswald did like guns. And anybody who wants to make him totally innocent and whatever, somehow a pacifist or whatever, that's not true. He liked guns as a teenager. He talked to his friends about guns. He joined the Marines, obviously, but he bought a private gun, and got in the brig for it while he was in the Marines. He even bought a gun in Russia, bought a shotgun in Russia. When they collected his private possessions after his arrest, he's got this whole collection of shooting and sports hunting magazines. So there's no doubt that Oswald was into guns, like pretty much. I'm from his same age and time, and I owned every form of gun that you could imagine, from BB guns, pellet guns, etc. It just was the thing. If he had not been, it would be really strange down here
Right.
where he grew up. So there's no doubt about Oswald and guns. What the grave doubt about is Oswald and shooting. In the Marines, and one of the things we bring up is in the Marines, he did pace his basic shooting score. Okay. When he was going through infantry training and basic training, he shot well enough to be declared, proficient, which is their basic shooting skill level. However, the second test or the last test he took in the Marines, he dropped way down and barely passed it. And which points out the fact that he was not in an infantry career field. He did not do shooting regularly. He didn't practice. And quite frankly, there is no solid clue that after he got out of when he was in Russia, he got laughed at by the guys in the factory when he joined the shooting club and went out to practice because they expected an American Marine would be a really good shot, right? Of course, he's a really good shot. And Lee Harvey Oswald never been, uh, he could be a loudmouth at times. I'm sure that he gave the representation that he'd be a great shot, and he wasn't, and he got laughed at. When he went hunting, he didn't particularly have any success at hunting, and he stopped hunting. So he doesn't have this ongoing history. There is really no history, even with a rifle or a pistol, that he did any shooting. A concurrent. If you've been a shooter, you do have to maintain your proficiency. You have to shoot periodically. You just don't go back 5 years later and you're the same kind of shot that you were before. And this is a guy who in 1963, he was supposed to be a good enough shot to make those shots, and we can only recover 6 bullets. Like, did he never buy any ammunition? That means he didn't do any, the FBI really wanted to find that he had bought some ammunition and done some practicing, and they couldn't. So, yeah, we do bring that up. We bring that up. That's one of the fundamental issues. When I think it's more fundamental, if you just looked at what the Warren Commission looked at and didn't look at his whole pattern of shooting and interest in guns. Yeah, he was interested in guns, but it was more interested in guns than interested in shooting, which is a very different thing.
Right.
I know I know guys who are both. They collect guns, they like guns, but they don't go shooting every week. I know other guys who go shooting every week and maybe don't even clean their gun. It's like, I'm into the shooting, okay, when's the last time you clean? I had one guy tell me, well, I clean it every time I fire it. No, that's not the way it works really, but okay.
Yeah, I hear you. Um, is there anything that you'd like to say about your book?
Yeah,
Get out there.
I think really what I'd like to say is it, especially for anybody who studied this for years and years and years. I have not run into anybody, even my oldest friends, who've been into this decades with me, who didn't find something new in the book. So I think I can maintain that pretty much anybody who reads it that's studied the assassination are going to find some new things about Oswald and some things that will surprise them about Oswald that have not been in the mainstream conspiracy books, because the conspiracy books largely have presented a one-sided view of Oswald. They want him to be innocent. They largely want him to be a tool. Of course, one thing we found is one of the few consistent things in his behavior is Oswald never took orders from anybody willingly. It's like, okay, you guys want him to be a tool. This is the guy who threw a drink on his NCO in the Marines, right? This is not a guy who takes orders easily. He has his own agenda. He goes his own way. So I think they'll get a different picture of Oswald that would help them grapple with who he was and really what he might have done. I think the other part is very few of them have seen an explanation of what he was doing at the time of the assassination, because that's not been out there. We've seen, and I myself have written tons about what was suspicious. Okay. And does that mean he was participating in some kind of a false flag, a witting tool of the CIA? He was willing to sacrifice himself. No sign of that. So if you want an explanation for all of those things that we wondered about, we'll give you an explanation. I can't swear that it's the right explanation. It's consistent, it makes sense, but it finally does give you, oh, if this is Oswald, this is what could have been going on with him, rather than, oh, that's just a mystery.
Do you think this is a good book if you're like a beginner in the JFK world? Is this a good beginner book, or should maybe you start out with one of your other books and then lead up to this?
I think this is a good beginner book because it will tell you, it will show the shortcomings of the Warren Commission, and it will show you the real Lee Oswald. And since the whole history of this assassination has been Lee Harvey Oswald, if you get a good understanding of who he was, what his agenda was, then you can look at, that takes you to the question. The real question at the end of this book is, well, if he was framed and if he was set up, who did this and how did they manage it? And that would take you to tipping point. So it's probably a logical entry rather than starting out with the conspiracy and then going, oh, what about Oswald? It would be like, let's understand Oswald and then answer the question of who was in contact with him, who was manipulating him, who could have framed him. Because if you conclude he's innocent, somebody had to frame him, and following the frame takes you to the conspiracy.
Right on. Do you have any final message you want to get out about the file release for people that are so pretty excited about that?
I'm excited about the concept, but I would say at this point in time, maybe the point is, don't assume it's been done. There's got to a lot of these executive orders that have gone out. It's sort of like, so what's the detail? What happens next? Um, you know, don't just assume because that and everybody I've talked to seems to be assumes that it's been done because they expect that I've seen new documents. So no, don't expect that. What I would say is this: if you log into the Mary Farrell Foundation website, maryfarrellfoundation.org, we're running a continuing review of what is not only what's happening with our lawsuit to release documents, but what is happening with the document releases. And you probably need to be checking that every couple of weeks or once a month, because we will be collecting. We know enough people on the inside that should be able to give you a sanity test on what's really happening versus what the press releases might say. Because quite frankly, the press releases tend to be overblown. Claim more ground has been delivered, kind of like Congressman Luna's statements like, do not tell me what you saw that said 2 shooters. Don't just tell me, and am I going to see it? And by the way, why didn't you post that already? If you saw something that said 2 shooters to you, we're talking about transparency. Where's the link? So let's do some, as with everything, like sanity testing is very important.
I get it. Well, Larry, if you don't have any final, or is there anything else that I forgot to ask you or something you feel is important?
No, I think that really covers it quite well. I think it's a good starting point. I think it's a good description of what the book does and doesn't do. And I think that's good coverage. And it's good that we talked about the documents because it's definitely not all and done.
Right on.
Hopefully it's a work in progress. I sure, after 30 years, hope that it will be a work in progress.
Yeah, right on. Well, I appreciate you coming on, Larry. Hopefully next time, if you come back on again, we can talk about maybe MLK or some of the covert CIA stuff. You got a lot of interesting topics under your belt.
MLK is really interesting and deserves an in-depth discussion. Because I think the funny thing about MLK for us in our books is it's the one conspiracy that we feel we actually solved to the point where we could name names. I mean, it is done. We know who did the shooting. We know who carried the money. We know who raised the money, and it gets talked about less. I don't know exactly why, but we know more about it and talk less about it than anything else.
Right on. Well, hopefully maybe we can get into that sometime in the near future. I know you got the JFK stuff going on right now, so that's probably top of the mind, but
no, that sounds good, and I appreciate the conversation.
Right on, Larry. I appreciate you coming on. You have a good one.
All right, we'll talk to you later.
All right, thanks, Larry.
Bye.